Any Justice Department official who does not comply with this law will be subject to prosecution for obstruction of justice. If Pam Bondi does not comply with the law, she will be held either in inherent contempt of Congress or subject to impeachment.
We want justice for these survivors. We want the law upheld. And we are showing that Article 1 of the Constitution, Congress doesn't have to be toothless. We don't have to be supine to Donald Trump. We can stand up and assert our power. I don't buy that it was just some child abuser, a rapist, pervert, and he had the world's elite at his fingertips. There was something more sinister going on, and that's what I want to understand.
We got a great guest for you guys now. Representative Ro Khanna has joined us. He has been at the forefront of a lot of issues, including the Epstein files. Representative Khanna, welcome.
Thank you, Jen.
All right, Ro, I'm going to start with showing a video of you from today, I believe, threatening serious consequences for folks if they don't release the files, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Let's run that video.
Tomorrow at midnight is the deadline for Pam Bondi to release the Epstein files. Here is the reality. Any Justice Department official who does not comply with this law will be subject to prosecution for obstruction of justice. If Pam Bondi does not comply with the law, she will be held either in inherent contempt of Congress or subject to impeachment. We will not rest until the law is complied with and justice is served.
So, Representative Khanna, is that realistic? Can she really be prosecuted if she does not release the files by tomorrow?
Yes, when we have a future Democratic administration, yes. I mean, look, there's some people who think let's just have kumbaya when we have a Democrat in the future. I believe we need accountability. I believe people who committed crimes should be held accountable, not just if someone violates the Epstein Act, but if they bombed people in the Caribbean who are innocent. I mean, we need to have accountability. If they gave orders to ICE where people were detaining American citizens or committing criminal acts, we need accountability. And she is subject to obstruction of justice. But the reason I gave that speech today is there are, as we speak today, Jeng, dozens of lawyers from the national security team at DOJ going through the Epstein files. They're doing that now. We know that from reporting. And they're planning on releasing things tomorrow. And what I wanted to signal to them is they better be doing this in compliance with the law or they're subject to future prosecution.
So when we talk about prosecution, we're not talking about tomorrow because the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. So it's Pam Bondi's not going to arrest herself as the Attorney General. Would consequences begin if the Democrats take the House in 2026?
Well, they could begin before that. I mean, Massey and I have talked about introducing an impeachment resolution against Pam Bondi, where we could get Republicans breaking and supporting that if the release of the files is not in compliance with the law. You already have Susie Wiles throwing her under the bus, the White House chief of staff saying she whiffed. So she is losing support among the Republican caucus. Second, she could be held in inherent contempt of Congress. That means the Sergeant of Arms of Congress could actually arrest her and there could be a trial in Congress about whether she was transparent. And we are pursuing a number of those things. Obviously, if the Democrats take back Congress, it'd be easier, but you actually have Republicans in MAGA willing to hold her accountable.
Well, that would be a hell of a thing if the Sergeant at Arms of the House arrested the Attorney General and put her on trial in the House. That would be epic and historic and unprecedented. But you mentioned Tom Massey. He also had something to say about this issue. Let's listen to that and get your reaction.
How will you know if they've released all the materials? The victims' lawyers have been in contact with me, and collectively they know there are at least 20 names of men who are accused of sex crimes in the possession of the FBI. These would reside in the FD 302 forms. So if we get a large production on December 19th, and it does not contain a single name of any male who's accused of a sex crime or sex trafficking or rape or any of these things, then we know they haven't produced all the documents. It's that simple.
So Representative Khanna, this is a second issue. So there's the issue of what if they don't turn them over, which is what we just discussed. But what if they turn them over and they don't really have the materials they're supposed to have in there? At that point, what can you guys do?
Well, first of all, for what Thomas Massie said is we will know if that's the case because there are lawyers of the survivors who've seen the files. They would say there's stuff in there that they haven't gotten out. Second, we would call the survivors back to the Capitol. I mean, they've had to come twice to have them tell the story about what things are still out there and have the survivors' lawyers say what needs to be still out there. After that, look, the same remedies apply. You could have any citizen actually withstanding sue the Justice Department. That could be survivors, that could be journalists suing for the release of documents. Those people would still be not in compliance with the law, so they could be subject to future prosecution if it was done willfully in terms of concealment. And the impeachment and inherent contempt remain on the table. The difference between Massie and me and some others in Congress is we are willing to use the full legislative powers to seek justice. Others are very polite. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't talk about inherent contempt, impeachment, having survivors come to the Capitol, suing the Justice Department if it needs to be. But we want justice for these survivors. We want the law upheld. And we are showing that Article 1 of the Constitution, Congress doesn't have to be toothless. We don't have to be supine to Donald Trump. We can stand up and assert our power.
Yeah, so I want to talk about why there's it appears to be only 3 members of Congress right now, but out of 535 or 435 in the House. But I'm going to come back to that in a second. So Massie there talked about 20 people that apparently the victims know committed sex crimes, right? Now, earlier in this administration, Bondi, the Justice Department, put out a statement saying that there was no one they were going to prosecute. There was no one who did anything else wrong. They already said that. So they'd have to now say we were lying or we were mistaken, and here are the 20 people who should be charged. I would be a little shocked if they said that, but it's obvious that they're covering things up. I mean, everybody knows this now. This is not even debated anymore. The right wing agrees with the left wing and the middle wing and every other kind of wing that they're obviously covering this up. So I don't think that there are individuals that are powerful enough, no matter how wealthy they are, that could get the entire United States government, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, no matter who's president, to bury this thing. So do you have a theory on who would be powerful enough to have kept all of this hidden for about 2 decades?
No, I mean, the release of the files may help us figure that out. But look, there were a lot of rich and powerful people who were involved. I mean, people who somehow got Jeffrey Epstein, a former school teacher, to be worth $500 million. Not $500 million in today's money, but $500 million back in the 1990s and 2000s. Well, that would be the equivalent of being worth billions of dollars today. There is people who were at these parties who included billionaires and senior journalists and senior government officials. So he had a network of very, very powerful people. And I guess one of the things we need to know is what were his motives. I don't buy that it was just some child abuser, a rapist, pervert, and he had the world's elite at his fingertips. There was something more sinister going on, and that's what I want to understand.
Yeah, I mean, this is potentially a tough question for you. It's not tough for me, but I understand people in Congress and official positions obviously have to be a little bit more careful with their speculation than me. But I mean, Dropsite News has already uncovered that he, in his emails, he constantly talked about Israel. He had Ehud Barak's over at his house 30 times, a former prime minister. He had Israeli spies at his house. He was trying to get America to bomb Syria and Iran. He arranged, I mean, he was so powerful that Ehud Barak could not get a meeting with Vladimir Putin, but Epstein got that meeting for him. I mean, that is an enormous amount of power. So will anyone ever look into whether it was an intelligence agency that did this?
Our release calls for documents that get to some of the intelligence and FBI interviews. And so I have refused to speculate because it would be irresponsible for me as the law's author to do that. I don't want to be accused of bias. My interest is transparency, but the law is drafted in a way that those documents should come out. And if there's something that is particularly sensitive to our national security, then they need to explain what they're withholding and why they're withholding it. So, we'll have a much better sense of how much information we're going to get and how much we're going to figure out tomorrow by midnight.
Yeah, and guys, pay attention to what Representative Khanna said there, because if they say in some of the releases that they're not releasing some things because of national security matters, well, that's almost a confession. So that would be a huge thing to note in the records. So let's see what happens. Okay, now to the political side of this, Representative Khanna, we now have a political spectrum that is all jumbled, right? We've got you and Tom Massey and then later Marjorie Taylor Greene working super effectively. Almost the three of you, I don't know if you want to give credit to others that were part of it at some point, but it certainly in the beginning, you and Massey started this, seemed to have swung the entire Congress and Trump just because you tried. But that leads me to ask the question, why don't other Republicans and Democrats ever try?
Well, it looks like we've started a trend. You now have 50, 60 discharge petitions. So I think we've woken up Congress. Discharge petitions on extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits, discharge petitions on banning stock trading, discharge petitions on standing up for workers' rights. I mean, literally everyone has suddenly said, oh, okay, we don't have to just sit here and listen to the president and Mike Johnson dictate what we do. We were actually elected to represent people and to be an independent governing body. And so Massey and I did something that has literally changed Congress. I mean, changed Congress not just in terms of dismantling MAGA and standing up to Trump. I think it's changed Congress forever. I think you've now got ordinary members unafraid of leadership.
Do you think the political spectrum is getting jumbled so that sometimes your most effective partner is a Republican like Massey because of the funding, that whether you're on the right or the left, if you don't take corporate PAC money or foreign government money, that frees you up to actually represent the voters?
I think there are unusual alliances that are being formed. I mean, certainly on matters of war and peace. I mean, Thomas Massey and I are strongly aligned, for example, against the bombing in the Caribbean and against a regime change war in Venezuela. And there we have more in common than some of the people I serve on who are Democrats on the Armed Services Committee. And so the reality is that when it comes to ending endless wars, when it comes to standing up against PAC money and lobbyist money, when it comes to reforming some of the corruption in government, you can have the left and the right stand up against the status quo that has failed people. And when it comes to more competition within our parties, calling out the old guard, saying you need primary challenges in terms of nothing is wrong with that. All of that is a sense of, I would say, populist energy, people feeling that their political and economic voice has been stolen, that they want to take back control of government. And that is a populism on both the left and the right. Now, I think the Democratic populism isn't just for tax breaks for the billionaires, and it's for Medicare for all and $10 a day childcare and stopping Wall Street from buying single family homes, and is more aspirational. But there is a populism on both sides.
Yeah, and so I'll give an example to the audience. Representative Khanna has a bipartisan bill to lower drug prices. He just took Trump's executive order and on most favored nation status and turned it into a bill. And on this very show, viewers suggested I reach out to Marjorie Taylor Greene to co-sponsor that. I did, and she did co-sponsor it. Now we're having agreement on lowering drug prices. We're way past foreign policy now. We're getting to core agreements on economic issues among populists. It's just remarkable. I've never seen it in 30 years of covering politics. I'm going to ask you a question that it's hard for you to answer because you're not in this group, but when other Democrats see you doing this incredible work on the Epstein files as an example, I don't get it. Why don't they come and join you? I mean, just as a matter of political calculation, even if they didn't mean it, it's kind of a layup. why aren't more people taking that layup?
Well, they have. They did come around. I mean, that's how we got 212 House members on it. Every member of the caucus. Now we've got the Oversight Committee leading on it. And now everyone recognizes that this actually broke the MAGA coalition. This was the one issue where Trump was not able to get his own members to fall into line. 70 Republicans were willing to vote for my bill in defiance of Donald Trump. So much so that Donald Trump went for calling what I was doing a hoax to 2 days later endorsing and signing my bill. I wasn't invited to the bill signing, but that we showed what is possible. And so I don't want to be a lone ranger. What I've hoped is that this is inspiring Democrats to be more creative, to be more bold. And I think it is. If you look at the number of discharge petitions, it's almost 50 times what we usually have. And so, when the history of this time is written, of course, it will start with justice for survivors, but it'll also start with how Massey and I not only may have ended the high watermark of Trump's presidency and ushered in an era of him being the beginning of his lame duck presidency, but may have also re-energized the sense of Congress, a moribund institution that had lost its way, is suddenly now waking up and saying, yeah, we want to vote on war powers. We want to vote on government reform and finding its voice again.
I just came up with a nickname for you. The Ro Ranger. Okay, so we'll see if that one sticks. I don't know. All right, back to serious stuff. So you've also broken another taboo in Congress, which is one that frustrated me for, again, 30 years. I didn't understand why you can't challenge leadership. Why can't we have a debate within our own party? What kind of democracy are we running? So you've called for Chuck Schumer to step down. In the past, that would have been considered heresy of the highest order. How has it been received now?
I have got to tell you, I've gotten 80-90% praise for that. In fact, one very senior person in the party said, anyone who wants to lead this party in the future, well, they're all going to come around to your position. You got to run against this old guard in the party, and you just got there first. It's mind-boggling to me because it was very different when I endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016, when I co-chaired Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020. Then I was seen as a pariah, ostracized. Now I think people are saying, you know what, that kind of guy, he's actually right. I mean, we need to be different. We can't just run the status quo. We need new leadership. We need to understand that we need a more populist message. We can't just be a status quo corporate Democrats. Like that is becoming the consensus. It's almost scary in the party, which gives me great hope that we're going to have new, bold members of Congress, senators, presidents that actually can redeem our FDR, William Jennings Bryan tradition of being a party that stands up for working class folks, middle class folks, makes life better, doesn't get us into endless wars, isn't corrupt, restores the American dream.
Yeah, well, that leads us back to the DNC, where I've got more bad news, though. So first, I talked to several people that were privy to the strategy at the DNC. I don't want to overhype it. It's just people that I talked to that know it to some degree. And when I asked them, what's the new Democratic strategy for 2026, they said, oppose Trump. That's not new at all. Trump being a bad guy is what they've run on for 10 straight years. Is that wrong? Is there a different Democratic strategy that leadership is talking about that we just don't know about? Or are they really going to go back to that same well again?
Well, I do think affordability has become part of the mantra. Now we need to have concrete policies on it, and whether that's breaking up monopolies with meat packers, whether it's figuring out how not to have food tariffs, whether it's making sure data centers are paying for their electricity instead of sticking local communities with bills, Medicare for all, childcare $10 a day. You need real substance behind affordability. But I do think that there is that positive agenda. The other thing is, when you're the party out of power, the anti-Trump stuff actually works because Trump is so awful in terms of what he's doing to families and his irrationality on the economy. The problem becomes if you just run on that, then you can't really build a governing majority, and you're going to lose power even if you get it for 2 years. And so my hope is that we realize that we've got to really have a bold populist agenda, that things like paid family leave, things like a living wage, things like Medicare for all, things like $10 a day childcare, a tax on billionaires, that can give us a runway. So it's not just, okay, we didn't like what Trump's doing, we'll give these Democrats a shot, and then, oh gosh, they're not making our life better. And then you get the rise of a virulent Republican comeback. It's just not sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Democratic leadership just doesn't listen. Like, we all know Trump is bad. That's not the point. We're not disagreeing with that. What we're saying is you need to also have a positive agenda that people are excited about because it affects their lives, right? That's the most important part. But that leads me to the second question. So the DNC apparently did an autopsy for what went wrong in 2024, and today they announced that they're going to bury it and they're not going to publish it, talk about it, etc., because they're quote unquote winning already in their minds. Now, at the same time, there's a poll out right now saying the Democratic approval rating for the party overall is at -55. So I just don't get it. And you're closer to that bubble than I am. So does Democratic leadership think they nailed this and that the country now loves Democrats? Do they not understand? Yeah, people are disgruntled with Trump, but they're also disgruntled with Democrats, and you need to figure out not just what went wrong, but what's still wrong today at a -55 approval rating.
Look, obviously we need to figure out what went wrong, but the reason I'm not all worked up about the DNC report, and they should release it, is just I don't think we're going to get there by talking to the consultants that they talk to anyway. I think we'd be better spent talking to people like you, people in the communities, podcasters, folks who are grassroots organizers. So, do I really want to read a report that a bunch of Democratic consultants who've run these campaigns in the past have said was a problem? Probably not. I mean, fine, release it, but that's not where the new strategy or energy is going to come from.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I don't know a category of professionals that have been bigger failures, unfortunately, than Democratic consultants. So you also, I mean, you're so active, it's hard to get all the things you've done in a half an hour interview, but you've also spearheaded an effort to try to get people to recognize Palestine as a state, get America to recognize Palestine as a state. So I'll ask this broadly, how has that been received?
Not well, but better than it would have years past. Look, the Democratic Party has a question that we have to ask is, are we going to be the status quo policy party when it comes to the Middle East? Or are we going to listen to our base and say that we should not be giving military sales to Netanyahu to kill civilians in Gaza? That's Delia Ramirez's No Bombs Act that I've co-sponsored. That we should recognize, as the UN has, that what took place by the Israeli government was a genocide. And that is Rashida Tlaib's bill, which has 21 co-sponsors, including me. And then we should recognize a Palestinian state to live side by side with a secure Israel. And I led that effort. And my view is those are the three building blocks that many Democrats support. The irony is all the big names in our party don't support most of those three building blocks. And there's never been a bigger disconnect between our leadership of our party, the faces of the party, and the grassroots. And of course, it's a matter of principle for me. I said where I stand, and I think it's going to be an issue that people care about in these Democratic primaries.
So well over 90% of Democratic voters want to recognize Palestine as a state. It's not a controversial position. It's only controversial in Washington. So how many people have signed on to that? Is it a bill or a letter?
It was a letter, and it was during the time of the UN. It got about 40 some signatures, which was significant at the time. Now, because it's not an ongoing bill, we can't keep working on it. But I think the more accurate numbers are 58 on Delia Ramirez's No Bombs Act. So it's still about only a fourth of the caucus, and only 21 on Rashida Tlaib, which is recognizing what the UN has, that well, the Israeli government committed a genocide. And my doing that with Rashida Tlaib had AIPAC start spending in my district against me to try to hurt me in my district. So, I've taken positions on both the Epstein files that I knew would upset certain people in our party and powerful interests, and certainly I've done that on Gaza. Recently, I've done that in standing up to some of the tech barons in my district on AI, saying no, you can't just go build data centers wherever you want and stick people with a bill. And I had tweeted out that I stand with Bernie Sanders over Elon Musk and making sure that this AI revolution works for workers and doesn't just eliminate jobs. And so, I have a fair amount of people who are opposed to me, who don't like the grassroots coalition that I'm building. But at the same time, it's earned me, I think, what is the most important, perhaps, quality today in politics, which is some trust, not a lot of trust, but some trust, because you're a politician still, some trust from people saying, okay, maybe this guy's actually going to do the right thing. Maybe he's actually going to take some stands and risk his own career for fighting for what's right. And I really think that is the most precious commodity right now for anyone in public life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the trust comes from challenging power when it's difficult, not joining later, and when the bandwagon's already formed, and you've done that consistently here. So, but I want to go back to the letter for a second, because look, cutting funding to Israel, I think is obvious, but I understand the pressures. I understand that. Let's keep it real. The money, 94% of Congress has gotten money from AIPAC. Rose among the 6% that hasn't. AIPAC, or the Israeli lobby. I understand the media pressures, et cetera, and calling it a genocide. Again, it's a layup. Everyone agrees, but in Washington, it's a completely different bubble. But when it comes to recognizing Palestine as a state, I don't understand what the objection even is. So is 3/4 of the Democratic caucus saying that the Palestinians shouldn't be allowed to exist as a state? I mean, that's brutal and vicious and crazy. Is that?
Well, yeah, I mean, they would say, "Well, it has to be conditional on first Hamas not being there, and conditional on them not having a government." I said, the letter clearly says a Palestinian state without Hamas that has democratic elections, but you have to recognize the possibility of a Palestinian state to be able to effectuate elections and get a Palestinian authority that is actually going to sit down and do that, as opposed to saying, well, we aren't going to even recognize it until Hamas is totally eliminated. I mean, the way you get Hamas out is by working towards a two-state solution. So this is why the Palestinians and many people in the Arab world have not believed us, because we say two states, but when it comes to the simplest thing to actually show that that's a reality, recognizing a Palestinian state, we say no. In fact, we have a law signed by Congress in 1990 that says if the United States were to recognize a Palestinian state in the United Nations, our funding to the United Nations would automatically be cut off. So to do that in the United Nations now, we would have to actually overturn a congressional law that says that the US cannot fund a UN that recognizes a Palestinian state.
It's just insanity. I mean, it's like during apartheid, if they said, no, we're not gonna let these black people go until they meet all the conditions that the Afrikaners demand of the blacks. Otherwise, the blacks are too dangerous and should never be allowed to rule themselves. I mean, that's literally what's happening here. But because it's beloved Israel, the rest of Washington bows down, but Ro doesn't. And that's courage, and that makes a difference, and that's what builds trust. So last thing, Ro, when it comes to the media, you do this, AIPAC attacks you, viciously, as they always do. They're always at an 11, right? And they call everyone in the country, I think at this point they've called 99% of the country anti-Semites. But has that had an effect in media coverage? Genuine question, I don't know the answer to that, because usually when AIPAC and the others do that, the media then piles on top of you. But you've got a lot of credibility in DC, so it might not have happened. So how's the media reacted to that?
a few articles in several outlets like Jewish Insider and Jewish News sensationalized some of it, but even they have been fair when I've pushed back on it. And I guess one, the climate has changed, so people saw with their own eyes what happened in Gaza, and that just affected people. People heard Smotrich and Ben Gvir say, "Starve them." That's the strategy to surrender, right? I mean, so I think that the American people have just shifted in a deep way on that. But the second thing is, I do believe I have some credibility having served in the Obama administration, having taught economics, having worked in technology and innovation. It's just harder to paint me as outside the American mainstream. And so, what I benefit from is that while I have bold positions that are progressive, I paint them as a guy who grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, who understands innovation, who understands how we build wealth, who wants this for every part of America, and is common sense. And I think so far, I'm sure that at some point it won't last. So far, the media, it's a harder challenge for the media to paint me in that way. And that's, I think, why when I take certain stands, I draw such ire. I mean, why tech folks were so upset when I said, well, we shouldn't just be eliminating jobs with AI, or why APEC is coming after me in my district, because they know that I have some of that credibility, and they want to erode at that fundamental asset, which is trust. They want to, APEC is running an ad in my district, not on saying things about my policies, saying Ro Khanna is a liar. And so they are going at my core character because they understand that I built some trust with the work I've done.
Yeah, it's kind of hilarious that in DC, if you agree with the overwhelming majority of the American people, they're like, does he have enough credibility? It's the exact opposite of reality. And of course, the media is different now because there's basically the mainstream media, which is what I was asking about. And then there's online media. And in online media, exactly. I don't know a Democrat that's got more credibility than you do. And that's because people see you actually fighting for the voters, not caring about partisanship, and leading on all these issues. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate you joining us tonight on the Young Turks.
Thank you, Cenk. Thank you. Keep at it. Your voice and platform has been a game changer.
Thank you. All right, Representative Ro Khanna, everybody.